Welcome to Exiles, a Gospel of Mark podcast. We're coming to you from Grace Church in Erie, Pennsylvania, where we're taking what we learn about ancient truths and the person of Jesus into our everyday life. So you can check out whoisgrace.com/Mark for the sermon and resources that we're using for our conversation. So thanks for joining us today for Season 3. This section of Mark is called The Jesus Way. It's going to take us through July 2024, and we're following Jesus through Galilee as he continues his teaching and healing work while training his disciples and facing down opposition. Welcome, everybody. I'm Derek. I'm here with Mike and Sarah and Stephen, and we're coming to you with another podcast episode. This should be a fun one.
His voice was so booming.
I was going to say, good
Did
intro.
you feel that?
I mean, I'm a professional.
It was like,
But it was
truly
different than your preaching voice.
This was you also had your own little voice when it came to intro. Remember when you did
Micah's
yours? He was like a radio,
late night, sexy tacos, voice.
almost like a news anchor, like type 5.
Hello, all you out
we
there.
We should do a mashup of everybody who introed and then compare them to Danielle, and then which is the standard.
She's so soothing. We were not.
Yeah, she's right. She's good. She's the professional.
Stephen was kind of soothing, but yes, you were very booming, like you were very, which was great.
Okay, great.
It sounded great.
Thank you. I appreciate your approval.
You're so,
It's become a thing since Danielle took it away.
So
welcome.
listen, we're at the midpoint of summer. We live on a great lake. I would say the greatest of all lakes, Lake Erie.
Weren't we rated really well or
USA
something?
Today, #1 lake in the United States.
Wow.
Go us.
Yeah, better than Lake Tahoe, which that's the one I might take a little bit of issue with. But anyway.
Isn't Lake Tahoe kind of clear and like really pretty?
Oh, yeah, it's gorgeous. And
Never
it's up
been.
in the mountains. And
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
well, we have a great lake as well. And so I want to talk about water a little bit. And so I would just ask, I'm assuming we all like water at some level, especially during the summertime. My question is, do you prefer to be in the water, near the water, or on the water? And why? And so we'll use this as kind of our little introduction as well. So who wants to go first?
I like being near the water.
Okay.
My name is Mike.
Oh, hey.
I work here at Grace. I like being near the water. I mean, in is great too. On is, I've spent long stretches of time on the water. That's been there, done that.
Like how near?
Yeah.
In the military?
Yeah, like months at a time. And
So it's not the same for you.
I like being in a boat, but when I'm over it, I'm over it. In the water, it's like fun.
out.
It's good, but I love being near the water. I mean,
Like a
I've lived
beach or like cabin in the woods, lake?
Yes.
Like
all the above.
all the above?
I don't think I could ever not live near water.
Yeah.
Like I've been in San Diego, Virginia Beach,
Yeah.
now Erie.
I feel that.
Like I love it when I see seagulls. You get like the salt air when you're at the ocean.
Yeah.
I love the things to do near the water.
There's not many seagulls in Erie, is there?
There is.
There's a lot.
There's a ton.
I don't ever hear them.
I just saved one the other day.
When
You
the
did?
wind comes down from the north out of Canada, all the seagulls get blown south towards
Yeah.
me, and they're in like the field
The
behind me.
closer you
and I'm
get
just-
to the water, the more chaotic. They're everywhere.
I don't remember, like in Scotland, when I think of seagulls, my brain goes back to Scotland because there's like seagulls galore.
Are yours different color? Are they like black and white or are they gray and white?
No,
It's not a thing.
they're like white.
Are they mostly white?
Yeah.
All right.
Do they squawk
feel-
in Scottish?
Yes.
They're like Gardy Lou.
That's
Which
where,
is actually applicable because
that's where the phrase came from. Yeah, perfect.
Stop.
Yeah. Making it up, but that's where it came from. Yeah.
Hilarious.
What about you, Sarah?
Near the water, I have an irrational fear of dark water.
Oh, wow. Really?
And we were briefly talking about this before we started. I have a very high respect for water. Like, it is a very powerful resource, and I don't mess around with her.
She's a force.
It has
I
a
do
gender.
not.
Wow.
If I go to the ocean and it's like crystal clear and calm, I'm fine. I will go out. But again, it's like, what sea creatures around? Can I see this jellyfish? I don't know. It makes me very nervous, so I'm very respectful.
What do you think's going to happen? You think something's going to...
Yes,
bite you
and
or
then
eat you?
It's kinda like
dark
falling through
water.
the floor with a
forget
shower?
it. You will not like Lake Erie. I'm comfortable enough if I'm at the beach or on the boat or whatever, and I can see, I'm all right. But Ben likes to go out on the boat, like out and jump in. No, I don't know what's under me. I don't want anything to do with it. My sister swears it stems from my dad used to prank us. This could have been my prank the other week. And I didn't have one. Anyway, so my dad
you're unfolding it now.
I'm unfolding.
Counseling.
I've opened the doors, so now it can flood out. My dad, I guess, used to tease us. So I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. We used to have like Caesar's Creek, Houston Woods, stuff like that. And it's all dark water. And he would be like, there used to be a town here and it flooded
That's
and
definitely
all
it.
the people
That's it.
died. And there's all these buildings and they never found people. And we'd be like, ah, like we were little. And Megan's like, I swear that's where this has come from. But no,
I think I can
You know,
concur.
yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
If you don't put your kids in counseling, you didn't raise them right.
and he thought it was hilarious. And I'm like,
There's a
I don't
new life
know.
goal. There's a new
I don't
life
know.
motto.
So near the water, I'm happiest. I like Mike. I love being around water. I just I can get very afraid very quickly.
How deep will you go in water that you can't see the bottom? Like up till ankles, knees, da, da, da.
Yeah, like waist maybe.
That's like
And then I'm probably out.
maxed out.
Yes.
Wow.
I'll swim around and stuff, but then I'm like, ugh.
It's not swimming.
There was one time, and then I'm going to shut up. There was one time where Ben took a bunch of us out on the boat. We went out. They wanted to go out, and they wanted to jump in and swim. And it was really hot. And I was like, okay, I'm going to jump in really fast and just get out. I jumped in, submerged, came up so quickly, parts of my hair was still dry.
That's
I was
some,
like,
that's some
I was like,
leg power.
I was just
You were-
panicking. And Ben was like, oh, gee. So I just kind of hung over the edge and then got back in.
Do you know that's a thing? Do you know that's an actual? My daughter played water polo.
Yeah?
That's an actual water polo exercise where they would jump in feet first off the diving board
Yeah.
and try to get as little of their upper body wet as possible
That
because they
power.
would jive in and power their legs so fast so that their whole body wouldn't go down.
Mr. Collins.
It was wild.
Yeah, you could
So
have been a water poloer.
maybe.
Yeah.
They're all
I
just
was a
deadly
lifeguard.
afraid of water. That's why they're so good.
So like
Pool
you can't
water, fine.
You can't even go tubing or skiing or something out there in
no.
case you fall off.
Nope. Went tubing my whole life as kids. I think another thing, I hated it.
Oh.
Flying off. No, thank you. And then I'm left in this dark body of water waiting for someone to come save me. And no.
There are many
Don't.
layers to Sarah McCoskey.
Wow. That's for
Like an
sure.
onion.
Of fears. I also don't like boats out of water. We'll talk about that in another episode.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a whole episode.
Yeah, it feels like it should be, actually. Yeah.
I think we do.
We're
need
almost
to
10
move
minutes
on.
in, guys.
So I'm gonna go easy and just go. I'm probably a near the water / on the water guy. I'm not a huge fan of being in. It's fine. I like to swim. You know, I like all of it, but at this stage of life, it's like if I can be on a boat, a jet ski,
Yep.
that's cool. And I love hearing the waves lap in. And just
Yes.
kind of sit and read a
Therapeutic.
book and
It's so
and
beautiful.
listen to that going on. What about you?
I'm a by the water. I like to know that I live by the water. We talked about
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that. But I'm not a by the water beach guy. I don't want to sit all day by a
There it
beach.
is.
Like, it's like,
That's
give me a
shocking.
hiking trail or something. So cabin by the woods, nice lake, a boat docked by the cabin so we can go out and have fun. So, but by the water, that's
But no relaxing by the water.
no, let's do something.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit on my butt for hours. And
Yeah.
What does Nicole like to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, she likes to sit on her butt
Sit
for
on
hours. You always marry
So
your
you
opposites.
said-
That's what
Yeah,
happens. Yeah.
So she sits, you go.
That's
Fine.
Great. Hey, this was great. That'll be the happiest part of the podcast today.
Great.
He ain't kidding.
It's all downhill from here. We're talking about marriage and divorce,
Dun, dun.
kind of honing in on the divorce part, since that's what Jesus does in our passage today.
Thanks,
We're
Jesus.
in thanks Jesus. And we're in Mark 10. And this little passage on divorce and remarriage. And so let me set it up, and then I want to throw you just a generic question about divorce. So the Pharisees have been trying to trap
wait.
Jesus.
Like bracing ourselves. Okay.
The Pharisees have been trying to trap and corner Jesus at every turn, and this is the latest in kind of their arsenal, and they're trying to catch him in a controversial question, and really, I think, hoping to get half the crowd to turn against him, and also, you know, John the Baptist just got beheaded for weighing in about marriage, and so I think they're thinking, hey, this is a good formula. Let's get Jesus as well. But the question that they asked Jesus, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? And then Matthew adds this little caveat, for any reason at all, and that's really the kind of the crux of this question. They're asking for an interpretation, honestly, of a passage in Deuteronomy 24 where there was a big argument in the time between rabbis of can people get divorced for any reason at all, or is there a very specific, only a specific reason they can get divorced? So again, here we are. We're waist deep in a very controversial subject. It wasn't just controversial back then. It's a bit controversial today as well. And I guess I would just begin with a general question. What has your experience been with divorce? And one of the things I started the message with this week was just, I think divorce is something that has, hit everybody at some level, whether you've been through it personally yourself or someone near to you. Maybe you came through it as a kid or a friend or a family member or whatever. But I think, sadly, divorce is something that we've all had to deal with at some level. So I would just kind of generally throw it out to you and just say, what's your experience been with divorce?
Yeah, so for me, the closest that I've gotten to it was my grandma. I was twice divorced, once when I was younger and a kid, and again when I was a little bit older. And so she actually came to live with us for a number of years while she was going through a pretty nasty divorce. And so as a young kid watching that, and my dad felt the effects of my grandma's first divorce. So it's one of my mom's favorite stories is, my dad did not have a great picture of marriage to go off of when he married my mom. My mom's mom died when she was young, so she didn't have a picture of marriage. Mm-hmm. They both kind of came into it not having great examples. But they made a commitment. We will never use the word divorce at any point. It's never a threat. It's never a joke. So my grandma was going through her second divorce, was living with us for a pretty significant chunk of time. I forget how old I was, but I didn't even know is grandma getting a deposition? Like I didn't even know the word because my parents had refused
but he knew
to
deposition.
use it.
Or
whatever. That's a good one. That's
that
a great.
was probably in there at some point.
Yeah.
So that was
wow.
Yeah. So that was rough to watch, even at a young age. My grandma go through that and how it affected all of us and all of our family, and to hear about how it affected my dad, and but also just really cool the standard that my parents set from the outset, and they've continued to go through some crap, but that's never been an option on the table. It's something that Emily and I have taken and run with.
Good. Hi. My life is littered with it. Littered. Wow. Like my parents divorced and then both remarried. Both have been divorced again after. So the people that they were remarried to when I was growing up, that we had all growing up, they split. So then I went through it again. And then I've had several friends go through divorce as well. And I'm going through it right now with a set of very close friends, which really, and we all have a lot of strong opinions about it. Again, it's not my marriage, trying to find a way to support that. But unfortunately for me, it's very, very common and it's been around. But back to what Mike said, for Ben and I, no matter how much current struggles or struggles we've been through, it's never been a discussion. And I'm grateful. He grew up with a extremely stable, wonderful life with his parents. They're wonderfully married, and he has. So that was great. But unfortunately for me, no, that's not the case.
What was the experience like growing up?
So younger me, when the first one, I was so young, I don't even really remember it. And then it was stable for a while. My mom had a lot of men in and out of her life, married, divorce, but they weren't around long enough for it to matter. And then when she met my stepdad, they were together forever. When they split, that was actually harder for me then. And I think it's because I'm grown. I understand life. I understand marriage. I'm married at the time. So it was that was really hard. And I spoke to my mom all the time still, but I couldn't bring myself to go back to my hometown or anything. I just couldn't handle it.
It was triggering.
It was so triggering. It was so difficult. And when I finally went home 2 years later, it was so painful. I'm glad I went. I was able to get on the other side of it, but it was really, really hard. And then my dad had remarried to my stepmom. They were together forever. They just split 2 Octobers ago, I think. And that one, I think that was just someone just pushed me right over. It was so difficult just because you see it from an adult point of view, so you know what's going on. So young me I don't remember being affected by it, just back and forth. Like, but other than that, I don't remember knowing any different.
That's interesting. So you'd say it affected you more as an adult
Yes.
watching it
Yes.
than even as a kid, which is
Because you understand it. Like,
Right.
you know what's happening.
right,
You know why they split up. You understand it from a very different
right.
perspective.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Two places my mind goes is growing up, I was kind of like you, Mike. It just was never on the table with my parents. So I felt like I was surrounded by my friends at school whose parents were either divorced or going through divorce or separation or something like that. So I always felt a little different, if you can put it this way. I always felt a little special because I had both of my parents.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, however I interpreted it,
Yeah.
interpreted that at different seasons of life. It probably conjured up some pride, some arrogance at times, thinking, "Oh, I actually have a whole family." So that's where my brain goes. It was never on the table. We've done the same in our marriage, Nicole and I. It's just it will never be part of our vocabulary. We won't even joke about it, even if we're being sarcastic. It's just never going to happen. I grew up with a mom, and this is not necessarily the the most accurate interpretation of this passage, but she wouldn't even go to bed angry. Bible says, "Don't let your
Good for her.
The
Sun go down.
on your anger." Yeah. I vividly remember, core memory. Mom and dad were pissed at each other, and my dad was. I'd never seen this. He was getting ready to sleep on the couch, and my mom came through with all the righteous anger in the world. It felt like I remember just watching it. She's like, "You are not going to bed on that couch. Get into this room, and we're gonna figure it out."
You're gonna be awake.
I've never seen my mom like that ever before.
He never slept on the couch ever again.
He never did. No, but he never did. I don't ever recall my dad.
It's not an option.
So anyway, that's
cool.
That's one lens, and maybe we're getting there. So if we are, great. But the other place my brain goes is as a pastor, and just scarlet letter is the phrase that runs through my brain, and maybe it's the compassionate side. I understand what Scripture says, and Derek, you did a great job.
Yep.
But I've just watched so many people navigate divorce and just be isolated and shunned by the church,
Ostracized.
Yeah, and scarlet letter is a phrase that has come up time and time and time and time again, and so that's where my brain goes. I don't think we've done a great job historically as a church in the 90s tackling this issue, and I think we'd do a little bit better job with compassion.
It's wild, and I go there too, Stephen, because I like you guys came from a very, this is kind of unusual that you're the only one that was kind of personally hit with divorce in your own family. To have 3 out of 4 that came from kind of like a divorce is not on the table kind of home. And so that's my story too, which I'm very, very grateful for. And it's amazing to see, like you said, it's littered through your family. Yeah. It's amazing to see also the precedent that gets set when it's not littered through your family. And I'm even looking at the generations that have followed, and really nobody has been divorced. And so it's amazing how it's almost contagious either way.
Correct.
You know?
Yep.
But I go to the pastoral side too, and having sat in many a room with couples trying to work it out over my 30 years, and just seeing how devastating it is, and I think the tension that I feel, and maybe we feel, is threading this needle of just going. We all know how terrible it is. We all know what sin has done to the marriage relationship, and so on the one hand, you want to speak so strongly against it, and just go, don't get divorced. Like, whatever you do, this is like it changes everything. But when you speak so strongly, it can come across like shame and judgment toward those who have been through it. And so it's such a tricky thing, because you do want to offer incredible grace to people who have been through it. And on the other hand, be encouraging to others of like, please don't even let this enter into your vocabulary. So I feel like that's the trick that we face, and I think that's the maybe I'm giving the church the benefit of the doubt, maybe too much, but because I think the church has tried to stand up and be the bastion of like, please don't do this. Yeah. That sometimes the flip side of that can come across as being scarlet lettery to those who have been through it, and that's a trick.
Yeah. I think the tension lives in our culture as well. Is we try to systematized complex situations. Right. And so people walk in, every situation is different. And you could, say this not just for divorce, but many different. And if we try to find systems so often in Scripture, we can very quickly remove the actual emotion, reality, facts of a situation that then minimize, So the woman that is sitting in your office, and you've got somebody else with you, and she's talking about how she met with another pastor, and they said you just can't get divorced, but she's being hit by her husband for the last 20 years, and the shame that she feels, that scarlet letter that she feels, because we've systematized Scripture in a way that's actually harmful. And it may not even be our intent to do that, but it's just, it's the tension that we have to walk.
I think it's a part of it is our just Western rationalistic culture. We just want to boil it all. It's black and white. Just give me the black and the white. Give me the line, and here's where it's, but this issue, among so many others, but this one especially, it is never black and white. It is always a shade of gray. You can't just go, this verse says that, boom. You absolutely can't. Even the ones that look, quote unquote, open and shut that I've sat down in front of, there's more to it. There's more. Even if the answer might be there, there's more. There's a way to go about it. There's care to be had. There's a way to shape someone's heart and spirit. So you just can't. This and so many others, it's never black and white. We can't boil it down. We have to live in that tension, because I think that tension is where God meets us into some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. So that's a great lead in to kind of where I want to go next, because one of the things in these we really looked at these two passages. One's in Matthew 19, one's in Mark 10, and there is this phrase in there where they're basically saying, divorce is not an option except in cases of adultery. Okay, so that's in the text. And I did a pretty long rabbit trail to go back through some of the Old Testament records and say it sounds very definitive in that case, but I think there's an assumption of some other reasons for a legitimate ending to a marriage other than just adultery that's being assumed. Jesus is actually addressing a very specific question about this one passage. But there's an assumption of other things, and I did my best to come up with a list, not to black and white it, but just to kind of show that maybe there's more than just adultery that would warrant a legitimate biblical ending to a marriage. And so death is an obvious one. If a spouse dies, a marriage ends, and that's a legitimate one. Adultery is obviously one, adultery of one or other of the spouses. Sexual immorality, the Matthew 19 verse uses that, which is kind of a broader definition of sexual sin than just kind of classic adultery. Fourth is the betrayal by an unbelieving spouse. This comes from Paul in 1 Corinthians in the New Testament, that, if you get into a marriage and one of the spouses isn't a Christian and then just leaves, that's a legitimate ending to a marriage. And then the fifth is kind of it provides a little bit of that open-endedness that you're talking about, which is treasonous breach of covenant vows. And, I think that the Exodus 21 passage kind of lends itself to be thinking about this, that, if there is extensive abuse, if there is abandonment and some of those things that we would say, for a lot of Christians in a lot of churches, they were like, okay, so I'm getting the crap beat out of me by my husband, or he's stealing money out of my bank account, or my kids are getting beat up every day, and you're telling me that I have to wait till he cheats on me one time and then I can biblically leave him. That's the rules. And it doesn't seem like that's what's going on here. And so what's happening is Jesus is providing this really countercultural view of divorce, because at that time they had a system kind of like our irreconcilable differences, where it was called any cause divorce. You can get divorced for any reason. If your wife doesn't cook your soup right, you can leave her. If she doesn't wear her hair right, you can divorce her. And so there was this kind of any cause divorce going on. And my question for you guys is, in what ways does the biblical view of divorce contradict the modern cultural view? Because in those days, Jesus was saying, hey, that's not the way. Let me give you a little bit more specifics around this. And so in what ways does this biblical view, even though I've listed 5 things, contradict our culture's view of divorce? How would you kind of describe what our America thinks of divorce, and how does the Bible kind of come at that from a countercultural way? And then maybe what are the underlying values that kind of are under each of those views? So I'll just kind of throw it open to that. How is Jesus's way a countercultural model to our current way?
Well, I liked when you pulled it apart and they were going back to the passage in Deuteronomy, I think, when the Pharisees were challenging Jesus, but Jesus goes back further to Genesis 2, and it's what's the underlying framework? What is marriage supposed to point towards?
Yeah.
Actually, the primary thing is to Christ and His church, which has become fully revealed to us. So then, that's the point. It's not actually about us primarily, and this whole. I mean, I don't believe in, your one true love and, maybe there, who knows? I don't know.
You complete me.
You complete me
So no.
I mean, I love you, Emily.
No, so
you complete me.
She'd say the same.
So is this a reason
She
for
would
her?
definitely say
She'd say the same.
But it makes it the focus on you, and the focus isn't on you. Like I love my wedding sermon that I give. I say love is a choice. It's not a feeling, because a choice is based on something outside of ourselves. A choice to hold up and honor the other person and to point to Jesus. It's not primarily about ourselves, which flies in the face of what our culture screams at us. It's about how we feel. It's about our good. It's about us.
Our needs.
Once that's not met, then I'm out. I got to go find out something. But that's actually the framework of marriage is not about you.
Yeah.
It's about Christ and His church. And so that alone, I mean, just puts the cultural and the biblical view of marriage on wildly diverging tracks.
It's good.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I'd go just as far as saying what Christ is painting here is a spiritual depth, value, and reality to marriage. And I think what we see in our culture, done a lot of Viking stuff in the last couple of months in the Nordic culture. And it was just very transactional, just very about pleasure, about checking boxes. You can move from one to the other. A lot of objectivity, like you're here for this purpose, they're there for that purpose, and it removes the, and I see it in our culture. It just removes the sacred and spiritual depth that I think. Well, we see Christ establish when He's talking about marriage. Just like you're saying, Mike, it's more than the person. There's a greater spiritual reality going on that's supposed to shine a light and actually tell a story of another covenant relationship that exists, and we just don't see that in our culture. So I think that's the contrast that I see.
That's good.
And the wild thing is I would summarize kind of both. You talked about transactional. That there's this that the culture's view is that the role of marriage is personal fulfillment.
Yes.
I'm going to get my needs met, and the instant I don't get my needs met,
I'm angry.
I can bolt from this thing. And what you're describing is this covenant picture is not only unlike that, it's actually the opposite.
The
of
opposite.
That.
It's a rebellion against or an attack against.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That says, actually, this picture that I'm painting for the world about what God is like is a picture of long-suffering, sacrificial love. And so, my needs might not be fulfilled in this moment. It might not be going exactly the way I thought it was going to go when I said those vows on that stage. But guess what? The picture that I'm painting is that even when that doesn't happen for me, I'm going to love anyway, because that's what God did. And I'm supposed to be showing the world that covenant love of God to His people and kind of living out a picture of that. And I really think that's a huge contrast. And the reason that Christians should be way more slow to be considering divorce, because that's not the picture that we're painting.
Well, and this, I read this sermon before we do the podcast and stuff, and then I'll come up and I mention, oh, hey, Emily, like this morning, it's on marriage and divorce. And she was like, great. And so we had like a nice, rousing 7 a.m. discussion about biblical marriage and divorce. So, yeah. But, I mean, we were going back and forth about what, and the different reasons and stuff. And, well, what if someone how many, adultery comes up. That's one of the cleaner ones. But I was just, how many times, yes, someone might be cheated on, and that's terrible. And if you've endured that, like, that's not how it should be. I'm so sorry. But if we flip the script and go, wait a minute, we are the adulterous spouse. If marriage points to Christ and his marriage to his bride, the church, we are all the adulterous spouse who cheats on God in every day in so many different ways, and yet Christ is always there, always forgiving, always welcoming, accepting, willing to reconcile with us. That's not a license to just, well, then divorce is never on the table because there are clear reasons.
Yes.
But that changes the default setting for Christians, especially when we walk through hard things in our marriage.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say as well, because there's always a temptation in these moments, is that we're waiting for the list because we're in a really bad situation. Yeah. And we're like, okay, Pastor Derek said, boom, my spouse did this, I'm out. And I'm, hear me really gently here, walk this tightrope. We have to be careful of the posture of our own heart, that our heart has not actually hardened towards a spouse who is genuinely struggling. There are jerk spouses out there. I think what's really important is that if there is a biblical godly sorrow present and a desire for repentance and a genuine struggle through sin, I think that road still has to be walked. And reconciliation has to be, and if we're going, okay, great, my spouse did this, he's on the list or she's on the list, I'm out, I've been waiting for this moment, I think we have to pause and check our hearts.
Yeah.
Like, has our heart actually abandoned our spouse who is genuinely struggling in a situation?
You took on another human being.
Yeah.
No one forced it upon you. Like, you made a conscious decision and commitment to take on another person on top of your own self.
Good, bad, and ugly.
Their needs, their emotional needs, physical needs, whatever it is. And and again, hear me gently, I don't know what people thought it was going to be when they get into a marriage. Like, and I've always been blessed with the fact that we knew who Jesus was. And as our life has gone on, even in our marriage, he becomes more and more and more prevalent in our lives. But like what you just said, I've watched Ben and he's watched me go through some really difficult transactions in our lives, whether it's mental, whatever it is. And we've given each other reasons to be like, I'm good. I'm out of here. Like, this is I
too
can't.
much. Yeah.
And we didn't. We've continued to stick it out. And when you get on the other side of the things, and again, there are lines, yes. But when you get on the other side of those things and you look back and reflect and talk through them and you realize that you've done that is so empowering in a marriage. And so the next time life throws something at you, because it's going to happen, you get to reflect back on what you did before and be able to continue to use those tools and stuff. Having Jesus around makes things a lot easier, but it doesn't make it easy.
And you don't see that crap on Hallmark Channel.
No.
Like, nope.
right.
You just see the Gucci lovey-dovey and Satan uses a Hallmark Channel.
Oh my gosh.
I said it.
Okay.
Whoa.
So hate me.
Say it louder.
I'm just kind
Here we go.
Email.
But
Burn the
that is-
cards.
Satan is not a dummy. He's weaving that lie in our culture that it's all about us and it's all supposed to be lovey-dovey. And once the flame goes out, like, it's right. What were you thinking when you got married?
Yeah.
Well, you were thinking what Satan wanted you to think, that it was going to all be hunky-dory from here. And it's actually tough.
It is so tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lumberg, Aaron, who works here, for those of you guys distant from Erie, but he put out I think it was on his story or something on social media the other day, and it was an old couple holding hands, and his caption was something to the extent of, when I look at pictures like this, my mind automatically thinks about how many times they chose to forgive each other.
Yes.
And I just thought, like, that's the picture of marriage.
Exactly.
I want to be 65 years in and just go, listen, I can't count the times that I chose to forgive Nicole, and she can't count the times. But those are the building blocks for why we're still holding hands today.
Yeah.
I
heard a story one time that said, that this woman, they were an old couple, and she said somebody asked them the key to their marriage, and they'd been married for 50 years or whatever. And she said, well, the day we got married, I made a list of the 10 things, the top 10 things that I thought he would do to me that I would forgive him for. And I've just kind of kept to that list the whole time. And one of the people said, well, what are the 10 things that, that you were sure that he was going to do to you that you would need to forgive him for? She said, I don't remember what the 10 things were, but anytime he did something, I just said in my mind, thank goodness that one's on the list. As you just, it's like, I'm going to forgive him for everything,
Yeah.
And just check it off as it happens. All right. So I was talking to a pastor friend actually yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about this, similar to you, Mike. And he said that, he had a 50-year-old couple come in. They were both on second marriages asking to get married. And he, was kind of digging into some of these issues that we're talking about here. What were the reasons? And talking about sexual purity as they went toward the marriage. And he said both of them literally started laughing out loud at him and basically said, those things are good for 18-year-olds, but we're 50. We're in a different stage. They didn't have him marry them because they were not willing to even think about those things. I think about, again, how countercultural the ways of Jesus are to the way our world just says, this is what you do when that happens. And one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the message is that when we hit controversial subjects like this, when Jesus says something that kind of shocks our system, we have a decision to make. When the teachings of Jesus go against our deeply held cultural or personal beliefs, we have to ask the question, will I follow him anyway? Do I trust that he's right and that I'm wrong or that our culture is wrong? And so I'll just vaguely ask or generally ask a question like, what has your experience been with that dilemma? Either personally or with people that you've worked with, where there's like something in Scripture that offends your sensibilities, and you go, but I'm going to go with Jesus is right, and I'm not right. And then, let's stop there, and then I want to ask a more general question about the church. But what's your experience been with that kind of dilemma? That when the Bible says something that's, I can't quite get behind that, but I'm going to believe it anyway.
Those are that whole category. We're not just talking about divorce, and we're talking about all the things. Those are easily some of the most awkward conversations to have. They get easier over time, and honestly, I have pastor in front of my name, so there's like an out to it's way more difficult to a family member or to a friend than it is to
100%
someone. I can turn the pastor thing on and be loving it, but this is. And then all of a sudden it becomes personal, and it's a whole different ballgame. Those are the most, they get me nervous beforehand. I feel like if you're listening and you feel awkward in some of these conversations, join the club. Yep. Like I'm with you. And the trick is just that balance between truth and love, saying it gently and lovingly, but holding, and they're just tough.
Because you're trying so hard not to judge anyone. You're trying so hard not to make yourself look better than them, and it.
Speak for yourself. You're a good person, and so you say I can't always claim that. This is one of those things for me that's hard.
And also, too, I think even just walking into the conversation and be like, even just admitting to them right off the bat, like, this is really hard for me. This is a really hard conversation. Good. I'm uncomfortable. Let's navigate this together. I think it just kind of sets the tone as this person who's having this real conversation with me isn't trying to minimize me. We're just genuinely trying to have a conversation and give different perspectives without judgment. That's my big thing when I have to do that.
It's interesting. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but you mentioning that. I just had a fairly recent conversation. I'm in a little group with couple of Christians, couple of atheists, couple of agnostics, and we're doing some, talk around the campfire over cigars kind of thing. Yeah, nice. Well, I don't know. Oh. I don't know if you do, but it's really good. But it was interesting. The one, they all know that I'm a pastor, and so the one guy just very directly looks at me and he goes, "So in your worldview, you think I'm going to hell?" I mean, just ask me point blank. And I said two things. I said, yes.
Good night.
I got that out of the way. Yes, in my worldview, unless you surrender to Jesus Christ, I do think that's what it says. But I said, secondly, hell is the most difficult thing in the whole Christian theology for me personally to grapple with. There's parts of it that just don't square with what I know to be the character of God, this eternal punishment for temporal crimes. There's something about that just doesn't sit right with me. But Jesus affirmed it and said it, and so I believe that it's true.
Okay.
At some level, I believe that there's something we still don't understand about it that will be clear one day, but I believe that what he said is true. And so this is one for me that he said it. It doesn't square necessarily with the way I think about that. But here's the other thing I would say. In that conversation with that person, it blew his mind that I admitted that.
Right.
Because his perception was that all Christians, especially Christians like me, love the theology of hell.
Interesting.
They love the idea that people that don't believe this are going.
We're going to ram it down your throat.
You're going to hell. He thought that this was something that we all just really got behind, and to hear me say, "I believe it, but I don't love it," was impactful for him.
Yes.
Because you identified with him in something he clearly struggles with as well, in a way he probably totally unexpected.
Right.
And unfortunately, he probably expected you to barge in and be like, my way's the right way, and be better than him and treat him like he...
Yeah.
And you didn't, and that was huge.
I'm just affirming what you said, too, that when you kind of start with that posture of just like honest...
Humility.
Reflection, like... This is hard. I don't love this, I think it really takes some of the wind out of the sails of kind of that.
It puts it does. It kind of lets everyone's guards down. Like, okay, they're not here to attack me.
Yeah. Can I ask this? What can the church do better with the issue of divorce? You talked a little bit earlier about the scarlet letter effect. What do you guys think the church can do better around this issue?
Scripture would tell us to listen before we speak.
Yes, listen.
And I think there's a profound reality that we need to spend a little bit more time in those situations, circumstances, listening to the details, seeing the heart that lives in between the lines, because there's facts and there's fault, maybe on one end, maybe on both ends. It's a complex web. It's a total disaster. It's a mess. The people that are, walking either into your office or into the coffee shop, wanting your advice, wanting your wisdom or counsel, you can't give it without listening.
Agreed.
And I mean, Scripture would tell us, right? We need to be quick to listen, slow to speak. And so that'd be my advice.
There's like the saying is, there's a lot that happens behind closed doors in a marriage. So what you think you see in someone's marriage is probably not at all the reality.
It's really good.
In a huge way. So listening is huge, and just giving them a safe space to be able to dump all of their fears and worries, anxieties, frustrations, anger about their marriage and what they're going through. And it also stems back to not everybody wants to be fixed. They just want a safe space to be able to dump. So if someone comes to you and they're really struggling with their marriage and they're seeking advice or wisdom or whatever, fine. But it's not your avenue to necessarily look at them and be like, this is not a good idea. You need to do A, B, C. You need to go do this. No, just give these people some space. Let them, what they're navigating is extremely difficult. And just giving them a space to be able to feel like I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be lectured. I'm just going to be okay to say what I need to say. And then those things will come in play. If they need help or they need this, they know they can come to you to get it.
I would say, and I'm saying this to myself as well as to everybody individually, but the church as a whole, we need to approach these topics with compassion first and not judgment. Like the lens needs to be compassion before judgment. Actually, judgment's not even technically on the table for us. Like whether it's divorce and remarriage, abortion, LGBT, we need to approach with compassion because that's what Jesus did, and just seek to care, because we just talked about how crappy divorce is, and not everybody wants to be divorced, and then they end up, and we need to care for people like Jesus did, regardless of how they got there. And then when we have an opportunity, I mean, obviously speak truth and be faithful to what Jesus commanded us, but it has to start, I think, from the foot of compassion and not judgment.
Yeah, we can assume a position or an occupation in those moments as physician and doctor. And so we're quick to try and prescribe,
Fix it.
here's the script,
Do this,
if you just do this. But we're not necessarily called to be the physician. We have a physician.
Yes.
We're called to be the friend. And so whether it even is a spiritual leader position, I still don't think we're called to be the physician in that moment. And I think it's important that we remove that option, and I feel it. I mean, I've felt it for years. People come and they're actually asking for advice, but my job is not necessarily to write a script and have you leave my office. My job is to hear and to gather the right amount of facts. And again, for you, Sarah, maybe they've never been heard for 20 years. And they just need a space to be heard. And that's the first step. That's the first domino that falls.
That's good.
It's interesting. I was just reading yesterday 1 Corinthians 4, and it's where Paul is kind of chastising the church in Corinth. And he says, basically, you've had lots of teachers. You haven't had very many fathers. Mm-hmm. And this idea that our job is not just to write scripts and go, here's the 1, 2, 3 to do, but there's this kind of mentoring, walking alongside, relational investment that really is the core of our faith, that as we do that with other people. So, all right, we need to wrap up. The next steps that we offered in the services this week was to pray 3 prayers, and I would encourage people to even continue to do this on their own. And the prayers are, Jesus, I believe you. And that's the first one, that before we can obey or have faith, we actually have to believe that he's right. And so, Jesus, I believe you is that first confession. Jesus, I resolve to do marriage your way. And Jesus, I need your grace. And so I would encourage folks to pray those 3 prayers as we go about our week around this topic. So I would encourage you all. Thanks you guys for this. Was a heavy one.
Thank you for coming.
This was. I am the guest here, aren't I?
Thank you.
Even though I'm hosting this thing. Guys, you can visit whoisgrace.com/Mark for resources. You can also submit a question. We would love that, or let us know how you're feeling about the podcast. That's a really cool thing when we get to reflect on your feedback. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks, you guys, for weighing in on the tough stuff. Thanks. See ya.
Bye.